All right, we are live. Welcome to another episode of the 10 Horse Monty YouTube channel, Monday Night Live. Got a bunch of people on here already. It's kind of cool. My little question going in was, what is your favorite bait to fish on a ledge or a drop? And we have several people on here that chimed in on that. 3/4 ounce jig or drop shot.
I'll take the first.
The jig.
Yeah.
Carolina rig crawl. We got football jig or a blade bait. Mine would have to be a Texas rig worm, like a 10-inch worm or something of some sort, probably. What's your favorite ledge bait, Mark?
Man, there's so many. That big worm bite special, when one thumps it out there in about 22 to 25, that's a good bite. Caught a bazillion on a big spoon, but the absolute best ledge bite in the world, if you can get it to go, is a 3/4 ounce spinnerbait slow rolled off the top of that ledge. Because when they come up off the bottom of the ledge and that bait goes over the top of them, you better have your toenails dug into the darn carpet. It worked really good here in the 90s. And I kind of discovered it, and as well as another angler I about the same time discovered it. And we had that to ourselves for a long time. And then I don't know how many big bass between the two of us we won in tournaments, and how many tournaments were won on a big spinnerbait out there deep. It's cool when you get it going.
Was Terry Bolton in on that?
That was Terry. Terry grew up in the back of my boat, and we were kind of gone separate ways in what we were doing at that time, and we talked about it, and he says, "Really, you've been doing it too?" And I said, "I've been doing it for several months." So there was an old Calgon dish or soap commercial for your laundry. It's called, remember the old Ancient Chinese Secret?
Oh yeah.
It was kind of Asian folks, and Ancient Chinese Secret is what they'd say. So Terry and I would stand in line in Red Man tournaments and other tournaments, and I said, "Did you throw the Ancient Chinese today?" And he goes, "Oh, they bit it good, didn't they?" And people were all around us like, "What the hell is Ancient Chinese Secret?" We laughed and we laughed and we laughed about that.
I bet that rod was put up for many years in that rod box.
It was never put out first thing in the morning. It was always got out once you got to your first place. And once you had what you needed, you put the damn thing back up too. I mean, we were really quiet about it. And, it was a situational thing. When you found an isolated piece of cover on a turn or a corner or something that had a very vertical drop to it. It didn't have to be real deep. It could be 10 on top, dropping to 20 or 15 or dropping to 25. But when you had that corner and you had that deep water on all sides, when that spinnerbait got over that, those fish would come up and get it. And all I was doing was just winding it slow, not popping it, not making it drop, not ripping it. But when it'd come off the edge of that ledge, guys, you better hold on to what you had in your hands, because they meant to kill it. It was a great bite.
Wow. So that Calgon commercial was the Ancient Chinese Secret?
Calgon, Ancient Chinese Secret.
So I thought it was like Calgon, Take Me Away. Was that another commercial they had?
No, that was later on.
That was later on.
Yeah, that's okay. After the spinnerbait secret was out, so we didn't have anything else we could talk about. So they changed all their marketing.
That's funny. That's funny. Yeah, I remember the Ancient Chinese Secret, but for some reason I thought it was I didn't know it was associated with Calgon. See, I learned, that's the first thing I learned tonight. It's good to know.
You had no idea it was associated with a spinnerbait either, did you?
I did not. I had no idea. Now I know. We might use that. We kind of got some lingo too. I remember when LBJ was a little, thing, and first time I saw that, I'm like, what does that mean, that acronym? And
and now it's little so brown simple,
jig,
right? Yeah,
little brown jig. But I kept seeing LBJ everywhere. This is 10 years ago or something, and it took me a couple months to finally figure it out.
Yeah, we had one of those a couple years ago, and then kind of like you, the cat got out of the bag on our little local lake, and I mean it was lights out for the first fall in the grass.
Yeah, you're talking about the whistle pig, right?
Yeah, the whistle pig.
Yeah,
see,
whistle pig. There you go. Yep.
But it was
it's hard to keep that under wraps,
It is, but it was one of those baits that you could literally, you didn't care where you were fishing at. You didn't care what stretch of bank that you went down. You didn't care who was there 30 seconds before you, because you knew it was going to catch more fish than what they caught that day.
In the right time of the year.
Yep.
There's a 3-week period where it was just lights out.
Sounds like a plopper.
It still works too.
Sounds like a plopper to me.
Close.
Mm-mm.
Close. we won't talk about it any more than that.
Done. It's still not out completely.
Gotcha.
Andy says, did anybody see the cannonball run on Kentucky and Barkley Lake Saturday? Cool to see, but not very fishing friendly. Can't imagine how much gas was burned through those engines. So I know you probably didn't see it. You were down in Pickwick.
I was at Pickwick. I was a damn low. So there's no telling how many boats were in that.
I was gonna say, I think every weekend at Kentucky Lake there for a while between the two holidays is a cannonball run, isn't it?
Oh my gosh, guys. Coming back in the third day, I was fishing way south on Pickwick. We were fishing at the dam in Tennessee at Counts, Tennessee. And I knew it was going to be rough because Monday, the holiday, was ridiculous how rough it was out there. So I left my area. I was 45 minutes down the lake. I left my area with about an hour and 10 minutes to get in. And I ran the first 35 miles as hard as that Skeeter Yamaha would go. And I got to about Bear Creek. And I thought, I better slow this thing down a little bit. So I backed it down to about 50 miles an hour. And then the next major creek up there is Indian Creek, about 5 or 6 miles up there. And by the time I got to Indian Creek, I was doing about 35 miles an hour. So the next major deal there is the mouth of Yellow Creek. That's the Tennessee Tom Bigby waterway. And that's where the Mississippi Navy tends to be. And from there to the dam, it took me about 20 minutes because I was running about 28 miles an hour. I was never so thankful to be in a 21-foot bass boat, and just cruised in. I got in with about 10 minutes early, didn't hurt my back. And I had a 17-year-old kid with me. He goes, this is pretty cool not being in a big hurry. And I said, guaranteed, we're going straight in, get our fish checked in, get on time. And there were several guys that were late because they didn't anticipate how rough that water was going to be. So that cannonball run on Pickwick was not any fun. And I've been on Kentucky Lake and Barkley Lake when we'd have one of those big poker run deals. And boy, it can just be brutal how rough it can make those lakes.
That lake is one of the roughest lakes. I mean, you've been on a lot more lakes, a lot bigger lakes than I have for sure. But here locally, to me, that lake, when you get a little bit of wind, you get 20-mile-an-hour wind coming out of the south or whatever. It just down there around Ken Lake in that area, for some reason, I don't know why, but they just stack, and they're not like they roll evenly to where you can really get up on top of them. It seems like it's just kind of real choppy and scattered. But
a washing machine out there.
It's a washing machine out there.
That's exactly what it was on Pickwick. The roughest place in the world is Lake St. Clair in Detroit. And there's so many big cigarette boats. And that lake is 27 miles long and 24 miles wide, something like that. Cow. And when those big boats get going, it is just like a washing machine. And you will absolutely knock every filling out of your teeth that you've got.
Wow.
And that's just all because it's so cut up. And that's what happens when you have current in a lake too.
Yes, it's nuts. Yeah. TB Brock says he caught a few Saturday on a Carolina rig lizard. And that's something that I need to start throwing again because I've seen
Carolina rig or the lizard.
No, the lizard. I still throw a Carolina rig, but the lizard, the lizard needs to come out of my closet. I mean, it's
careful now. This is a family-oriented show.
I knew you were going there, man. I knew you were going there. I need to go through some of my old plastics and see what's in there. And I think a lizard is one of those that needs to be in the boat for sure because I've seen it play recently. I was fishing a BFL in Table Rock, and I saw the guy in front of me catch most of his fish on a lizard. And it's one of those baits that I forget about it because there's so many other creature baits out there that you overlook the lizard, but it still works, man.
Old lizard will catch a big one too.
There's a lot of those old baits from yesteryear. What'd you say, 1882? While ago,
like that,
that will still catch them. I mean, they didn't start catching them and stop catching them. They'll still catch them. So
I remember that baby. Wasn't it called a baby Huey? That big old plastic worm from down in that
big old long paddle tail 10-inch worm. Yeah, yep. Hugh Harville made that for years and years and years, and it was a big plumb one. You couldn't get it past a fish on a stump or a brush pile out there in 15 to 20 feet. And the best thing about the baby Huey was when a smallmouth would bite it. Oh, good Lord. They would absolutely knock it into tomorrow. They would hit it, that big thing. So Awesome. You could literally call it when you hop it up and one would eat it. You go, yeah, that's a smallmouth. Hook him, and here he comes jumping. Caught several 5-pound smallmouth on an old big worm like that.
Wow. That's when I was still fishing a 7-inch worm, like a power worm or
and
something.
Thought that was a big worm.
And I thought that was like, a decent
Right.
sized worm. And I went into some tackle shop down in Kentucky Lake. I can't remember which one it was. And I saw the baby Huey, and I think there was even one that was like 12 inches or 13 inches or something. But I just remember seeing that big hunk of plastic. I'm like, what in the world's going to eat that thing? And now it's like a standard size worm.
Mm-hmm.
What's the deal with plum?
Plum. Well, we'll go back to my college days and we'll talk a little physics here.
Okay.
All right.
We'll talk about the wavelength of light, and every color has a different wavelength of light. And the ones that hold their identity, the colors that hold their identities, the longest and the deepest in water are the ones that are closest to blue. Either blue, which is a primary color, purple, or green. Those colors hold their identity deeper in the water. So plum is a form of that purple. It has a blue flake in it. So it has the ability to keep its identity as its color. I mean, its color. So then you have the silhouette that you can see out there as it gets deeper and deeper and deeper. And that's why those fish find it so well. Most of the time on the Tennessee River, from Chickamauga, well, I mean, the entire Tennessee River, in the summer when that big worm becomes a player, you have a reasonable amount of visibility, depending upon how much current is being run. Current silts up and water moves, and you get some dinge to the water just because of the movement. But most of the time, you've got between 18 and 24 inches. And now, once you get to Guntersville, it's so clean, and you get on the Kentucky Lake with the zebra mussels and the things that we have, you may even have more clarity than you may have 3 feet of clarity in the summertime. And it just allows that purple to be seen from a longer distance because it holds that color and that silhouette the best. But plum is deadly in a lot of places. It's pretty good at Rayburn. I catch a lot of fish on it in Rayburn. I did pretty well with it at Lake Fork here the other day. Caught some good fish on a plum cutter worm. It's just a universal, just a plain old purple worm used to catch them. Why can't a plain old purple worm with blue flakes still catch them?
Well said. So do you use plum and a lot of other soft plastics besides worms?
I really don't. That's a great question. You think about drop shotting and you think about the trends of these colors called morning dawn, and you kind of blend that blue and that violet together, and you got purple, you got plum. So it goes back to the strength of that physics that I learned in college. I didn't learn much in college, but that was one of the things I did pay attention to, because I go like, yellow disappears and it kind of turns to a brownish or a gray, and red disappears first on the color spectrum. And so why would I want to throw a red shad worm? And it started limiting the colors. And I'm old enough, guys, that the next greatest thing that came out was the color selector. Did y'all ever remember that or remember reading about that?
Yeah, I remember.
I think my dad had one.
Well,
maybe still in the basement.
Well, a buddy of mine actually had one, and we went to a tournament out in Oklahoma on the Arkansas River. And he says, well, let's see what this thing says. I said, you don't need to. It's going to say purple, or it's going to say black and blue. So out on the river, it was real dingy, and he dropped it over the side, and sure enough, it said black and blue. We got into the bay that we ended up finishing 4th in that tournament and having big bass 2 of the 3 days, and then it said purple. I said, well, you need that thing for? Hell, you got me. Let's go fish. And we had a great tournament and had a lot of fun. We laughed at that thing every time we tried to use it after that. We already knew that. So it's amazing some of the gimmicks that have come out, but all it was a light meter, and it just told you what the most visible spectrum of light was.
Right. That makes sense when you said the yellows turn into like a brown or a gray. So chartreuse, blue bat, perfect example right there.
Well, one of the things about fluorescent orange, fluorescent red, fluorescent green, chartreuse, they maintain their identity no matter how deep you go.
Okay.
So you see that pulse, that real bright color. You see that. You see it on the surface as you would at 30 feet of water.
Okay.
So fluorescents don't change. And I should have made that statement before, but I'm just talking about regular colors, not fluorescent colors. It's in that blue. It's either one side of the blue, either in a green or a purple, and blue being the best one that holds its identity the deepest.
Perry, I see you on here. He was the giveaway winner last week, and I will have your stuff out here in the next day or two. I was waiting for a couple things to come in, so didn't forget about you. Just hang tight, and we'll get that on your way. While we're talking about that, I just wanted to remind everybody that's on here that we will be doing a giveaway here in a little while. And if you're new to the channel, the way the giveaway works is sometime during the stream, I'm going to make a reference to Sasquatch, and Mark has picked a number. And whenever I do make that reference, guess a number between 1 and 200, and whoever picks the number is going to get a prize package. So keep your ears peeled for the golden magic word. It comes in at random times. You just never know when it's going to come in. So you got to be on your toes. Brad said he was out fishing Kentucky Lake today, fishing a ledge with a 10-inch spoon. Jeez.
Ice cream scoop right there.
Hubcaps.
Jeez.
It's work. It's work.
I tell you what, though, I never got to experience that spoon bite on the Tennessee River, but I've brought it here to some of our local lakes, and that spoon bite, you talk about a 3/4 ounce spinnerbait bite, slow rolling off of a ledge. When you get in that spoon bite, they'll knock the pea water out of that too.
Absolutely, they will. And you know what's funny?
One of the best bites.
You can see a school of fish that's inactive, and you're casting a worm or you're casting a jig, and you pick up a crankbait, you drop a drop shot on them, you can't get them fired up, or you're catching a bunch of fish and you see a big school of them, you can catch them, and they're little guys. Always pick that spoon up there, because the biggest fish in the whole school is going to smoke that spoon before anybody else does. It's an amazing thing that happens with that big spoon. I was fishing a Bassmaster event here years ago, and I had this one school. They were 14.5 inches, 15 inches. I had a limit of them, but I mean, they didn't help. So I got tired of that, and I hopped that big spoon about twice, and I instantly added 2 5-pounders on the first 2 casts, and then culled up with a whole bunch more, and ended up with about 22, 23 pounds that day. And it was a learning experience quickly for me. And the next day, I didn't pick up a worm the next day. I hopped a spoon the whole day and had another big bag that day in that tournament too. So it's a big fish bait.
You got to ice your shoulder the next day after that, though.
Ice your shoulder, your wrist, whatever, your back. It is work.
It is,
but it is a great way to excite a big fish.
I tell you what. So yesterday I was on the lake. I had a ball tournament this weekend with my boy, and we went after the ball tournament. And I was throwing that big spoon, not a 10-inch spoon, more like a 6-inch spoon, but a spoon nonetheless. And I found a school of stripers.
Whew.
And I watched, so they weren't giant stripers. They were probably 4 or 5 pounders. But on forward facing sonar, I was watching my spoon fall, and I watched them all conjugate around it and follow it down. None of them ate it. And I would rip it up, and all of them would follow it right back up. It was like a cat and a laser. And then when one of them hit it, they all went berserk.
Cool.
It was a great bite, but I don't like them stripers. They're an annoyance more than anything.
Yeah.
Because they're here. You'll scan over a nice little offshore hump, and there they set, and you just think you landed on the greatest school of largemouth you've ever seen. And one cast out there.
Well, they're fun when you're just out fun fishing.
Yeah, but they're not fun in a tournament.
No. They just take up a lot of valuable time.
Yeah, they do, especially when you get
they're better than a catfish, though.
14 or 15 pounder. Yeah,
catfish will slime your line up, and you got to retie.
Yeah.
Dave says, Mark, why do you think the Paducah Fishing and Honey Show is kind of a dud? With the lakes right there, you would think it would be better. You were the only thing worth going for. I guess that's a compliment.
I appreciate that very much. It's becoming very difficult, particularly in a sports show. I've worked with that promoter for years. He's put on great shows. They're easy folks to work with. They work all over the country, and I love working with them. It's hard to get a fishing show, period. There's only 3, the Collinsville show is one The East Tennessee Fishing Show is another one. And there's one or two more in this part of the world. But it's hard to get just fishing there. So these promoters come in, they've got spots to fill, and they fill them with whatever they can, be it hunting, be it taxidermy, be it outfitters. I'm personally, I'm not real interested in going to Africa to kill some kind of animal with horns that are this tall. I don't care anything about that. There are people that do. I don't care anything about going and fly fishing and trout fishing in Montana and Idaho. There's people that do. So you have to have a broad spectrum to bring people in. But I really think if we could bring more fishing industry people into these shows again, it's become quite costly to do these things. Again, I had the COVID scare was still kind of lingering here in the Paducah show. Was very surprised that we had it this year. Glad that we had it. It's great to get out and see people that wanted to talk fishing and do the seminars that I did. But I think we'll see these shows expand a little more. Hopefully, if we don't get strand D, C, E, Z, H of this pandemic that we've had. I don't know. It would be great to see more fishing. I know we had lots of people come to our booth, the D2 fishing booth with the Die Safe and the Dying Fish Dying. So, man, we just would really hope there would have been more fishing here, but there just wasn't. So I'll relay that to Chris O'Hara and say, hey, let's get some more fishing in there as we've been requested for it. So hopefully we can make it happen better.
And with a show like that, it's hard to appease everybody, right?
It is.
There's, like you said, you have to have such a broad spectrum, and then you get too broad and then nobody comes, and then you get too focused and nobody comes. You got to find that happy spot. And like you said, the last couple of years have been uncharted waters for all of us.
Absolutely. Well stated.
And the weather plays a big role in that too. I mean,
yeah.
if you have just a weekend where it actually, you have some 50 and 60 degree days in the wintertime, there's going to be a lot of people that have cabin fever that are going to go out on the lake.
Well, and then you got just the opposite. You could have a weekend where nobody's going to travel because of
the ice and
the
snow
ice
and
and snow that time of the year. So
right.
you want a nasty, cold, rainy
shoot.
Weekend, but not a
snowy.
Yeah.
It's funny that you say that. My daughter, she works as a hostess at a local restaurant, and she says, Dad, you can't believe Saturday was dead in the restaurant, completely dead. And I said, why? She says, Saturday's one of our best nights at the restaurant. And I said, Caroline, it's just like a sports show. You can never predict when that crowd is going to show up. You can never predict when that crowd's going to leave because there's a ball game on television or whatever. When UK plays, you might as well hang it up in this part of the world.
Right.
So it's really hard to predict who's going to be there and when they're going to be there.
We go to the same Mexican restaurant right up the road here. It's like a mile and a half from the house, and we go on Wednesday nights, and we show up at 5:30 or 6 o'clock, like clockwork. Sometimes we go twice a week, but it is different almost every Wednesday. Sometimes it's like you got to wait to get a seat. Sometimes you can just walk right in. You can pick your spot out on the patio there, and you're the only one out there. You never know. And it's got a lot to do with like you got softball and baseball season right now. Right. Youth baseball. If it's a game night and a lot of the people that are in this area, their kids are involved in that certain set of games, well, there's nobody going to be at the Mexican restaurant. But vice versa, if everybody's got the night off and they want to go out and eat some tacos and drink a beer, it's just going to be completely packed up there.
Exactly right.
Heck, we see the same thing on our Monday night live stream. We're here every Monday night at 7:30, but we'll have one night that it's still pretty out in summertime and they're still grilling. About 8:30 is when we start seeing an influx of folks, not at 7:30 when they're still finishing up their supper.
But we always have the playback. So if you're late to the show here, make sure you go check out the beginning of this show.
You're so good.
Yeah, snuck that in there. Darius says never go fishing on the weekends, especially on a holiday. I got something I want to get into a little bit later about the holiday and fishing and the people that seem to make their way to the local lakes during the holidays. Tom says, nice job at Pickwick, Mark.
Well, thank you, Tom. It was sometimes you go to a tournament and you don't go to win. And that's kind of a negative statement, but sometimes you go just to get through it. And I went to Lake Fork and found a late spawning fish pattern that was, it was a 21-pound pattern, guys. That's what it was. I caught 21 pounds all 3 days of the tournament. And on the holiday, on Monday, I found a group of fish at Pickwick that I went flipping and pitching. I didn't fish deep this week. Everybody was out there. It was round robin on every piece of structure. There were boats bumper to bumper out there fishing and throwing at the same group fishing. I thought, you know what? I'm too old to do that. I won't come out of that smelling very nice, because I'll open my mouth and there'll be a fight or two, and these young whippersnappers will whip my butt. But I just wanted to fish by myself, and I found a group of fish that were late post-spawn fish that were just coming out to the river, and they were easy to catch. Any current break that there was it a stump, a rock, a lay down tree, a corner, I could pitch a game hog up there and they would pick it up and they'd swim off with it. I think I caught 12 keepers the first day, almost 20 keepers the next day. And then conditions changed a bunch on me the last day, and I only caught 7 keepers, but I had a chance at catching a 3.5 to 4 pound fish, 1 or 2 of those a day. And I was lucky enough to land all those. So it looked like I hit a double straight up the middle. But I mean, I pieced it together, guys. I promise you, I pieced it together. The last cast I made on the 3rd day, I culled a 1.5 pounder for a 3.5 pounder. And I said, let's go face the Navy. We got to go. And I caught most everything I caught on a Bama Bug Strike King game hog.
Yeah, I was listening to you on stage, and I remember the Navy, the Alabama Navy, the Mississippi Navy, the Tennessee Navy. You named them all.
Navy in Tennessee.
You have a shout out to every Navy.
They were all down there, huh?
It was unbelievable.
So the pattern you found, did you find that based on past experience, or how did you piece that together? What was your starting point on looking for that pattern?
Well, my starting point was I knew that this was going to be a ledge-oriented tournament, and I spent the first part of the morning looking at the structure. I went down and actually spent 3 days a month ago with one of my best buddies that had never been to the lake that needed a chance to go fishing. He went with me, and we rode and we idled and we scanned, and I've got 150 waypoints, and darn near every waypoint that I put on that Lowrance graph was a player, but I couldn't get on any of it. And when I finally go over and look at one, I'd see a few little fish over here and a few little fish over there. And I said, I've got to find something that's different. So by going shallow, I went down the lake, or up the lake, upstream down to Alabama, and the lake narrowed. So it compressed the area that I had to look for the fish. I didn't have to look, out on the flats. The current was rolling, and anytime current runs and runs hard, it compresses every fish in the river to the banks. So then all I had to do was start looking at the banks and figure out, do I need to have a stump? Do I need to have a cypress tree? Do I need to have a corner? And once I figured out what I needed to look for, I could run down the bank and go, yep, there's one right there. There's one right there. And there's one right there. The cool thing was after about 2 days of this, I realized that if I caught a fish off of a stump or a cypress tree, a specific cypress tree or stump, I could go back in 2 or 3 hours and catch another one. But I could fish 30 more that looked an awful lot like that and not catch one. So I would come back and revisit each one of those. So I made a milk run of about 10 or 12 good pieces of cover, and I just made a milk run around it. I'd see them about 3 times a day, and I never knew when I was going to catch a fish, but I'd catch a fish off of those specific pieces of cover. It was really cool once I honed it in that last day.
That's got to be the current was hitting those certain stumps just right, or they favorable for the fish in that area. I mean, why would they just pick those few stumps like that?
I don't know. So, when I was at Lake Fork, it's just a sea of dead trees. And I found this one little wispy line of trees coming off the bank. They came off the bank at about a 45-degree angle. They started in 3 and ended in 7, and it was about a 30 yards. And the second day of tournament, when I found it, I caught a 613 and a 512 and a 4 pounder off that. So the next day, the third day, I show up and I fish that thing. I'm fixing to blast them. I know I'm going to catch them this time, and I don't get bit. So I turn around and come around and fish them from the inside out, and I catch after just fishing them from the outside in, I catch a 7.6, I catch almost a 4, and another one almost a 4.
Huh.
So later that night, I called one of my buddies that used to room with me. He's a guide down there. He's one of the best guides on Lake Fork. His name's Brooks Rogers. Brooks and I were talking, and I said, "You're not going to believe what I caught him on." He goes, "Well, tell me where." And I told him the name of the bay, and I told him what it was. And he goes, "You realize you found the absolute best 30-yard stretch in the whole damn creek." And I said, "You got to be kidding."
You're like, "Of course I did. That's what I do."
I didn't even try to play it off like that. Brooks knows me too well. And he said, did you come back and fish it multiple times during the day? And I said, yeah. And I would catch one or two, and then later I'd come back and catch another one. I had about 8 or 10 trees out there that I'd put waypoints on, drop shotting out there on points that I could go and run to that tree, fish 50 yards to that tree, catch one off that tree, fish 50 yards the other way, and never get another bite. So I just started running those places I'd gotten bites in the tournament and ended up with a great tournament. Sometimes it's about the way they're positioned, whether it's at Lake Fork, it was having multiple kinds of cover together, either having a hardwood tree and a cedar tree next to it, or a cedar tree and a bozark tree next to it, whatever it was. It's almost like grass fishing when you have milfoil and hydrilla next to each other, or coontail and lily pads or whatever. That's what it was. Those fish were late spawners. So here at Pickwick, it was about the positioning of having a backwater relatively close, because those fish were coming from that backwater out to the river, and they were just trickling out. And I think it was the last of the last. I don't know if the pattern would have worked another day or not, but I got my 3 days in, and I was glad of that. And the points I got have got me staring at the Classic right in the face now.
Yeah. Good work, man. Good work. That's so important right there, is knowing what you got. You know, if you get out there and you start rooting around and you're like, I'm not going to catch 22 pounds a day. I need to figure out how to catch 14 or 15 and just save face. Make that cut.
You get paid and you get those points, and it's that consistency that drives you to the Classic. You know, in the last 2 tournaments, guys, I've moved up over 30 places in AOI. I mean, I was down there in the doldrums. I was looking at a potential of falling out of the Elite Series for the first time in my career. And I said, I'm too proud to let that happen. I'm going to work harder or work smarter. And, you know, that's what this gray hair does sometimes. This gray hair, you've seen a lot of things, and you don't panic. You keep your cool just an ounce longer. And just by being cool an ounce longer, you get a clue. And then you get a pathway. And the greatest thing to me about tournament fishing is going from the last day of practice to the first day of the tournament, which is the hunch that you have that I think I can do this and do well. And then you learn an ounce more, and then you learn an ounce more. And then you go the second day and you're like, well, I'm throwing about half of what I did the first day away, and I'm going to focus on those 2 ounces. And then that turns into a good bag. And then by day 3, you're running down the bank of, no, I'm not doing that. Oh yeah. Look at this coming up here. I'm getting ready to crack a good one here. And there he is. He's a 4-pounder. You're like, yes, that's the thing that drives me now. So it was really good to have 2 strong events, not home runs, not triples, but just good hard base hits. And excuse me, guys, that'll carry a lot of momentum for me going into these next 3 events.
Yeah. I think that when you do finally get in tune, or we're all trying to get in tune with what's going on that day. And when you reach it and you start putting somewhat of a pattern together, and you can eliminate stuff and just focus on that. I have a problem doing that because I'll get sidetracked, you know? So, you know, like what you said, you go down the bank and you know, they're on an oak tree laydown. It's got to be an actual laydown. They're not on a stump. They're not on a bush. It's got water in it. They're on a piece of hardwood that's laying horizontally into the water. You know that's what they're on, but you keep fishing and trying all this other stuff, not getting a bite. And then you come up to another laydown, boom, you get a bite. Sometimes we just want to, especially as that don't get out there all the time, you know, like the
Right.
weekend warriors and the guys that just fish a couple times a month. It's hard to be disciplined enough to actually pull that trolling motor up and just run to the next laydown, or put the trolling motor on high and go to the next laydown and not flip all that stuff in between. So that's something that I've been working on, is being more disciplined once the pattern starts presenting itself, to actually run the pattern and not waste time. You know, put yourself in those high percentage areas over and over and over, and you're going to have a better, more productive day. It's a learning thing.
I had a 17-year-old kid with me as my observer on Saturday, and he was like, "You're not fishing any of this?" And I said, "Have I caught a fish on anything like that?" He said, "No." I said, "Don't waste time. Go to the goods." One of the first lessons I learned on the Bassmaster Trail is go straight to your fish. Don't stop 60 yards from them on blast off. Go straight to the fish. And I've stopped several times, 50, 60 yards, and here comes another boat, and they stop dead on the goods. Go to those fish. Don't waste time. But there are times that you get one bite and it takes you completely out of the game. You know, I've been, you know, you pick up a spook for the first time, or any kind of topwater like that, and you move that thing, walking that bait along, and one eats it, and you're like, "Oh, that was a good one." And you throw that thing for the next hour and a half. You don't get another bite.
Yep. We've all been there.
Well, I think 9 or 10 of those laydowns you just described on the way down the bank, you know. Just pick that flipping stick up and go catch.
What separates us weekend guys a lot of times, like you said, though, is knowing when to cut bait and when to know that you have a pattern, right? Because I think back usually at the end of the day or the next day when I'm going to work, or when my brain's trying to clear off, it's like, there was the pattern. I had the pattern. It just didn't register until too late.
But you got to run it. You got to, okay. So it's kind of like fishing brush piles. If you know they're in brush piles, you get a bite on a brush pile, then you run to 2 or 3 more brush piles and you don't get a bite. You're like, huh, was that really a pattern, or am I just doing something wrong? You might have to run 10 more of those before you get that bite. It's the same thing with those laydowns. You might fish a couple, and in the back of your head, you're like, well, I thought I had a pattern. I just caught 2 or 3 fish off laydowns, but now I've been through 2 or 3 more and I didn't get a bite. Yeah. So then you start fishing down the bank again, and then the pattern starts dwindling, and then it changes. That's the things that we have to work on all the time.
It is. And I think what a lot of guys, and I'm guilty of this too, I think, you know, there's so many methods of fishing. You got a shaky head, you got a drop shot, you got a weenie worm, you got a wacky worm, you got a flipping stick, you got a crankbait, you got a thunder cricket, you got a spinner bait, you got a buzz bait. And I'm the world's worst buzz bait fisherman on tour, hands down. I miss 9 out of every 10 that eats my buzz bait. So it's a great practice lure for me, but I won't throw it in the darn tournament because I'll lose every fish or miss them. So I think what we have to do sometimes is find a technique in which you are very good at. You know, I mean, a lot of guys shy away from that 8 and 10 pound test line. Never been scared of it. I've been fishing 8 and 10 pound test line since I was 10 years old. That's one thing I like to do. I like to throw a spinning rod. About 35% of the fish I catch on tour is on a spinning rod. Not scared of it. But it seems like in the last little bit, that flipping stick and I have become real good friends again, because all of this sonar, all of this great C map and all that mapping that's out there, it's pulling everybody out there where I used to fish, where I used to have to find them with a flasher and a paper map. I had it all out there by myself for the longest time. Now everybody's out there because they can drive right to the structure. Well, I've just gone right back to the bank and I'm fishing for unmolested fish now. That the majority of our serious bass anglers are trying to focus on learning offshore, and they're leaving a whole heck of a lot of fish over there on the bank for me. And I appreciate it very much. I won't lie.
It's usually a lot calmer on that bank too, isn't it?
A lot of times, I'll pick the windy bank, you know.
Yeah.
Wind's always your friend. But yeah, it's easy. It's a term of how it's easy. You know, man, I can't tell you how many bazillion fish I've caught on a game hog or a rage craw, just flipping down the bank, just in whether it's boat docks or bushes or whatever the heck it is. And I'm just after to get that solid tournament like I've had these last 2. But but let me have a chance to see where I can go for the throat and see what I do. I'll fish that big risk. But right now, the smartest play for me is to be conservative and hit as many base hits as I can.
Right.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Let's touch on some of these questions here. Our Mark says, Mark really like the dye to fish product.
Well, great. We appreciate that. That, you know, the dying to fish dye is soft plastic dye that I have my hands in, and I make a lot of it. We manufacture it here in Paducah. We've got a dye containment system called a Dye Safe, so you don't spill the stuff in your boat. It's a little company that two buddies of mine and I put together. And if you like to dye your plastic worms, put that chartreuse on the tail, or blue or red or green or whatever. We've got that for you. So I appreciate that very much.
Martin says, FYI, Mark did an awesome job announcing for bass on Pickwick Day 4. Very informative.
Oh, Marty, I remember the days when we ran the Illini Redmans together and he came down to the LBL. That's been a long time ago. I appreciate that, Marty. I've had several comments today about that, and that could end up being what my next phase in the fishing world is. But had a lot of fun doing that. Had a good young angler there next to me, Greg DePalma, who's he's working on his second classic right now. And then Kobe Krieger. What's to not like about Kobe? He's old grumpy all the time and hard edged, and he's really soft like a big teddy bear. But it was a lot of fun to work with him too. So I appreciate that, Marty.
And you've been on BTL numerous times, which you did a really, really good job on BTL.
That was fun. You know, that was the year I hurt my back, and Mark Jeffries from Bass Zone asked me to do that, and I actually got to commentate with the volume turned down using the Bass feed, the Bassmaster Elite Series feed, and it was a lot of fun. I was grateful for Bass to allow us to the privilege of doing that, and knowing that we weren't going to disrespect the sport or embarrass the organization or us as well. And it was a lot of fun, and really enjoyed that. It kind of gave me a little something to look forward to do with the fishing, because I wasn't able to fish because I was rehabbing this old tired back of mine.
Yeah,
it helps to have that perspective though too, that you add to the element, not just
well, you're not a sports announcer. You're a guy that's guy that's living it. You know what's going through those anglers' heads while they're out there doing it. You can see.
Well, I do. You know, years ago, I did the color commentating at the Classic in 2004 and 2005, and it was the first time Tommy Sanders had ever done live TV. So I'm working with Tommy, and Tommy, of course, when he pitches the conversation over to you, it's as big as a beach ball. He's the world's best, the greatest commentator for bass fishing. And the producer was a guy named Jim that had done Wide World Sports back in the 60s and 70s. And he had won many sports Emmy awards for his productions. And he walks up to me. He can see I'm starting to sweat a little bit. I'm getting ready to go live on national television. And he says, Mark, I said, yes, sir, Jim. He says, just want to tell you one thing. Tommy is the TV personality, and you're my professional fisherman that I need fishing knowledge from. And I kind of went, huh, okay. I calmed down. I looked at Tommy and I said, I'll carry you the rest of the way, Tommy. And he says, good, because this is the first time I've ever done live TV. So we'll let it rip. And we had the best time. I think we had almost 22 hours of live coverage at the Lake Wiley Classic, and then about 30 hours of live coverage at the Pittsburgh Classic. It was a lot of fun, a lot of work, but it was a lot of fun.
Well, that's the way to do it. Just jump right in, man. Just go for multiple hours, and instead of just dipping your toes in there. June, what's up, June? Got June from Japan. Good to see you on here.
June. I bet June cannot guess who I'm going to fish with in the next couple of weeks.
June, any comments?
Namiki-san, Toshinari Namiki, the first Bassmasters Classic qualifier from Japan, who's a great friend of mine. We're going to be filming next week for about 3 days on some of the local lakes that I film television shows on, doing stuff for YouTube for him. And he's got a very special guest coming with him, a very famous Japanese fishing YouTuber that I can't pronounce his name, but it means monkey. So maybe June knows who that is.
And this is going to be on Mark Menendez TV? YouTube,
well, it's actually going to be all for Toshi's YouTube stuff. So maybe Toshi will give me some of the footage, and we'll share it as well. So hopefully we'll get that. It'll be fun, I promise. We've been friends for, oh gosh, we've been friends 25 years now. We used to share information and work together, and we just it's two friends that live across a big ocean that love the same thing in fishing, and we're going to have a big time, I promise you.
Well, June's a great guy. We met him. Oh, it's been several months ago, and he has a company called Dream Express Lures, and he sent us one of those giant 9-inch swim baits, those glide baits that he makes. They're super sweet. Wow. And man, I've thrown it, June. I got one bite on it the other day, and I was so happy that I got a bite. I missed him, but he did like knock a little bit of slack in my line. I swung and missed, but that thing is it's mesmerizing. I just keep watching. I just keep waiting for that,
that black
7 or 8 pounder,
right
7 or 8 pounder to come up there and just suck it in. It hasn't happened yet.
Well, don't it's going to be throw that thing on Kincaid.
Owns it.
What's that, Mark?
Don't throw that thing on Kincaid.
No, I've actually made that statement before on this live stream. I will not lose that thing. It'll have a steel leader on it, and I don't want to mess up the paint job. It looks too good anyway.
No.
But yeah,
it won't be thrown at Kincaid. I promise you that.
It will not go.
Imagine that.
Too many toothy critters.
Yes, sir. What's up, Rich? Good to see you on here. Daniel T. What's up, brother? Let's see what else we got on here.
There's a good one from Brad.
Here's a good one from Brad. He's kind of transition into Kentucky Lake. He says, I've seen more shad this year on Kentucky Lake. Have you noticed the same thing?
Well, it is. It's great to see plenty of the shad buffet on the lake. I got on stage at Pickwick and I froze a bunch of people. I said, kids, get ready. You're getting ready to have the exact same crash of your bass population as Kentucky Lake did several years ago. I went on to explain that I have my degree in fisheries biology. I work with Yamaha Right Waters. I did all the legislative things to help get monies to our area. And I had a lot of guys come around back after I made that statement. Yeah, there's the War on Carp shirt. I've got the very same one on right here. But the bass there are very long and lean. They're very thin. They are, some of them post-spawn, like I said, so I'm taking that into account. But what I'm seeing, I could not find many shad at Pickwick at all. Not at all. And that was the first thing that goes when the Asian carp population starts to build. They don't have as much Asian carp issues as we do. They don't have as many as what Kentucky Lake has, but there's a lot of them there. So finding shad for the fish to eat was very hard for me to do. So I'd like to know what the crappie population is, because once the shad population takes a dive, crappie population, the bass population take a nosedive as well. The health and vigor of those fish look just like Kentucky Lake. Kentucky Lake is making a good comeback. I can't put my finger as to one thing. I think it is a multitude of different things. I think the commercial fishing of the Asian carp is helping. It can't do anything to help but get those fish out of the system. I don't think we've had a serious Asian carp spawn for several years, so those fish have not exploded again from those that we've taken out. Many, many more shad in the lake, many more gizzard shad in the lake, and what I'm seeing as far as the bass population on Kentucky Lake, it's remarkable. We have got a ton of 10 to 16-inch fish, and the amazing part about it is how many of them are smallmouth. Smallmouth have done really well in this interim period with low populations of black bass in the lake. They have really brought their numbers up as the largemouth are pulling theirs up as well. So it's not uncommon right now to go out there and catch you 10, 12, 15 keeper smallmouth in a day, which used to be kind of a tough deal. Right now, catching 10, 15 largemouth in a day is pretty tough. And in the average day, if you're out there fishing along the main lake or fishing an area where both of them live, you're going to get about a 50-50 catch ratio right now. And from what I'm seeing, it's a lot easier to catch a 4-pound smallmouth than it is a 4-pound largemouth on Kentucky Lake. So it's great.
Yeah, I mean, I fished several of the BFLs this year, and you look in almost every bag that comes in, and it's 2 or 3 smallmouth in almost every bag.
Isn't it amazing?
Yep, it really is. And they're healthy. They're beautiful fish. It's amazing how they've just kind of slid into that little void that was created, by the largemouth. But now, what about spotted bass? Is there still a decent population of spotted bass in Kentucky?
Back in the day, back in the 80s and early 90s, I made a lot of money catching big spotted bass. In the 80s, when I was in high school and college, I would get 3 or 4 keeper spotted bass in a boat. Now, I'm not talking about little hammer handles. I'm talking about 14 to 15-inch fish that weigh 2 3/4 to 3 1/4 pounds. And then I'd slide 1 4-pound largemouth in there, and I'd have 17, 18 pounds. We had as good a spotted bass fishery as anywhere as compared to Lake of the Ozarks, not quite like a Lake Lanier or anything like that. But I don't know how many 4.5 to 5 pound spotted bass I've caught in my life here in Kentucky Lake. It's numerous. They disappeared once we had the grass come into the lake. The grass covered up their spawning habitat is what basically happened. And I'm seeing an uptick now of spots in Kentucky Lake. Saw quite a few of them over the last couple of winters below Kentucky Dam on the Tennessee River and on the Cumberland River. So it's great to see him back. It's my favorite little fish. He's a little bully. He's got a little teacup mouth on him. He's this long. He's this big around, and he's a mean little dude. And he's the state fish of Kentucky. So those numbers are not big yet, guys, but we're seeing some of those too. And the lake can handle all 3 species, that's for sure.
Well, you mentioned the grass. Will we ever see a population of grass come back into Kentucky Lake?
You're going to see it sooner than you think.
That's great.
Guntersville has basically lost all the hydrilla and milfoil. It has been replaced with eelgrass. Eelgrass is a native species, so it's not an invasive species like hydrilla and milfoil. Those two are, we see them spray, we see pellets thrown in the water. So I don't think that this Fish and Wildlife are going to do that much to the eelgrass because it is a native species. Downstream at Wheeler Lake has been on a downturn for quite some time. The Decatur Flats are covered in eelgrass now. Now it's taking 25 to 27 to win Tuesday and Wednesday night tournaments again. So it's awesome. A lot of eelgrass in Pickwick right now. And that stuff will break up and float. So the current, as it comes through the dam, is going to be in Kentucky Lake in the next 2 to 5 years. We'll start seeing a lot of that get rooted, and we'll have that great habitat, that grass that recruits all the little fish to big fish, and it'll be back. And I think it'll be in form of eelgrass, not necessarily milfoil or hydrilla like we've had in the past.
Do you think it'll span all the way to the North Dam?
I think it will over time. Will that be 5 years? Will be that 10 years? The issue with Kentucky Lake, which is different than almost any lake on the Tennessee River, is the difference between summer pool and winter pool. It's a 5-foot difference. Summer pool is 359, winter pool is 354. So that means that population of grass has got to be deeper than that 354 winter pool level. So that means it's got to be at least 5.5 to 6 feet deep. And eelgrass in this clean water that we have in this day and age on Kentucky Lake, Guntersville, the eelgrass is all the way out to 13, 14, 15 feet. So if that happens, it's game on. It's game on. So I think we're in for some grass in the future.
So how does that grass hold up to current and heavy flow? Because, that's partially responsible for all the grass, getting removed from Kentucky Lake, all those winters where we had a really high flow for several months.
You think about milfoil, and that's a long strand that is rooted at the bottom with a small root base. So it really doesn't take a lot of current to pull that out. Hydrilla looks like spaghetti on the bottom, and then it starts growing up. And it really doesn't have a strong root base. But eelgrass looks very much like a lily that might be out in your grandmother's front yard. Big flat leaf that comes down to a base of roots that go out there and spread out in several different directions. So one piece of eelgrass may have a 3x3 circumference of a root system there. So I think it will hold better in certain areas than in the direct current. So I think there's a real good chance if it gets here, which it's coming, it'll be okay. I really, really do.
That's great news.
Yeah, that's awesome. Does it actually top out and lay over, or what's the characteristics of it?
It will grow up, and it may grow as high as 2 to 4 feet tall on the average plant. So if that plant is in 2 to 4 feet, it will top out and lay over. The problem with it as an angler it's a very it breaks very easy. So you can cast across it and reel a bait through it. If you've got treble hooks on it, it will break it, cover up your treble hooks really well. So it breaks into particles, and that's how it spreads. And there will be times on certain lakes with a lot of eelgrass when that breaks up and the wind blows, it may cover up your whole area where you cannot physically make a cast with a bait that has treble hooks. The only way you can fish it is to punch something in it that's weedless, like a Texas rig worm. So it kind of has its own headaches. It's a little different to fish. It spreads the fish out a lot. It gives them a lot of habitat, so they don't have to just stay in one little small group. You end up starting to fish bigger areas than just fishing spots. So, but I think it'll be great. What it's done so far to Gunnersville and Wheeler and now Wilson, it's been pretty cool. So hopefully we'll get it and it'll stay here.
Okay, we got several more questions on here, but I wanted to stay with the Asian carp thing just a little bit longer before we touch on some of these questions. About the spawning, the Asian carp, the way that they reproduce. Can you talk a little bit about, how the egg is deposited and it kind of rolls in the current along the bottom of the river, and just that whole scenario? How does that work?
Well, they're not like a game fish that has a bed. They're not like a bluegill or a crappie or a bass that has a bed, which the eggs are deposited, the milk comes on top, they're fertilized like that. So they're free spawning, and the milk and the eggs are mixed at the same time, and they are semi-buoyant. It's very similar to how striped bass spawn. Striped bass need 55 to 75 miles of gentle current so that those eggs can float through the system to mature and hatch. We don't exactly know how long, or I don't exactly know how long it takes for the Asian carp to hatch, but we think it's less than what the striper is. Somewhere between 15 and 20 miles is where we think that's at. So they hatch on their own, and then there's a mass of them, and they get into groups just as fry do, and they survive in that manner. So one of the things that I have asked biologists at Federal Fish and Wildlife to talk about and see what they can research is there a way that if we can figure out when those fish spawn, is there a way that we could shut the water flow down for 24 hours? And those eggs that are floating in the current, if the current's not moving, they sink to the bottom, they die. We use no kind of pesticides in the water, no chemicals in the water. We don't have any ill effects that way with negativity of that. So if we could ever get that figured out, that would be an instant way that we could do a lot of damage to the Asian carp population. So that's a theory that's being looked at and talked about. But our lakes are for flood control first, navigation second, energy third, and then recreation and fishing are later on down. But flood control is the real deal. So it would be a real hard thing to do. You shut down Kentucky Lake with a big lot of water coming through it, it's going to jump 6, 7, 8, 9 feet in 24 hours.
Yeah.
And we can't have that. But if we had the opportunity that we knew that those fish were trying to spawn or spawning at a specific time, and we had the availability of the capacity of the lake, it'd be cool that we could just shut the water off 24 hours or maybe 12 hours or maybe just 5 hours. And all of those eggs sink to the bottom, and we wipe out a whole generation of Asian carp. It would be a real cool thing to do if we could do it.
Man, yeah. And while we're on this topic, AFCO, if you guys aren't aware of this, you kind of talked a little bit about it. They are promoting this shirt. A lot of their the proceeds, I think it's 10% of the proceeds from this shirt.
No, not on that shirt. It's $5 out of that shirt goes directly to the war on carp. 10% of all of AFCO's profits go to support conservation.
Okay.
So on that shirt, a $5 bill will go to fight Asian carp just from that shirt.
Yeah. So anybody that's watching this, that's interested in supporting that cause, this is one of the great ways to do it. I mean, this is a really nice t-shirt too. It's super soft. It fits good. It's reasonably priced. Yeah. There you go, man. Right there. Yep. So this is one of the many ways to support that cause. are there any other ways that if people are interested in helping out with that, they can?
This issue is not dead. We've made great strides on Kentucky Lake. We've got a bioacoustic fish fence that we're doing. We got it below Barkley Dam, seeing if we can stop those fish. We've got lots of stuff still going, but I still need every fishing license holder to get in touch with their elected official, with their county judge executive, with their local representative, their congressman, their House of Representatives person, whomever, their senator, whomever. Stay on them. Say, please stay abreast of the Asian carp problem, because this is something we need to continually work on. This is nothing we're going to fix tonight. It's not going to stop now. This is something that's going to take some time. So please address those letters to your senators and your congressmen, congress ladies. Please do that and don't stop. Once an economic crash happens like it did at my house around Kentucky Lake, you get their ear real quick on the economic issue. Because there's a new fish in town, they're really not that interested in knowing that. But when the fish takes away money from the constituents that they represent and may make a difference in the voting on how they get their voting done, you get their attention pretty quick. But it was devastating here. We were losing somewhere in $1 million a month per county on the 12 counties that surround Kentucky and Barkley Lake in Kentucky, which adds up to about $180 million for our area. That's a lot of quarters, guys. That's a lot of quarters. And there were a lot of families that were really devastated by that. So please continue the vigilance with your elected officials.
Unfortunately, it takes a proof source like the Kentucky and Barkley Lake area to make some noise on this. The Mississippi River, it hit there. We noticed them on the Mississippi River, but that's just more of a waterway, correct? I mean, it's a way to get up and down the river and to get goods up and down the river. Not a lot of fishing from here south on the Mississippi River, but
there's not a lot of tourism associated with the Mississippi River, really.
And that was one thing that you said. Anybody that has a fishing license, I'd say anybody that has a boat or wants to travel anywhere up and down the Tennessee River, as much as we don't like them, the jet skiers, the pleasure boaters, what you would call them, the Mississippi Army, the Alabama Army, we all need to band together on this matter and fight the good fight for this one, because it's put a damper on Kentucky Lake, and it's coming to a lake near you if you're connected to anything that's got the Mississippi River flow through it. So.
Oh, absolutely. I have seen them as far as you can go on the Tennessee River. They're just about as far up the Missouri right now. The Illinois leads to the Great Lakes. That's where the real fight began, to keep these things out of the Great Lakes. It's $1 billion fishing industry on the Great Lakes. They're down in Venice, Louisiana. I've seen them as far as, excuse me, guys, let me kill that real quick. I have seen them as far west as the Sabine River in Texas, which means that they came through the Atchafalaya Basin out into the intercoastal waterway, and they decided to go west. So it's a fish that is adaptable in so many different ways. And hey, they're good to eat. They are good to eat. Us good old rednecks, we don't like anything with the name carp on it. I'm not going to eat that. But if you see a fish in the supermarket labeled silverfin, that's an Asian carp. And they are a good flavored fish. Nice light fish flavor, white meat, easy to grill, easy to bake, easy to fry. So it's a good fish to eat, and I would love to see more people give them a try. And I think you would really like it.
Well, heck, Mark, unfortunately, we have a hard enough time in some of our local lakes getting fishermen to keep a 12 or 14-inch bass to help the population of bass, much less keep a 30-pound Asian carp.
Well, I understand.
We fight that battle every day, but I understand, and I'm guilty too. I'm not one that will take, my limit of my 12-inch bass home to clean and eat them. But we all need to fight the good fight, whether it's bass or the Asian carp. And, we start chipping away slowly at it, and we'll be in a better place a lot sooner than we were yesterday. So
absolutely. Every one less Asian carp in the world, we're in better shape. I promise you.
Mm-hmm.
Silverfin. That's the commercial name for it, or the supermarket name for it.
It is. I've seen it in a couple of our restaurants here in town called Kentucky Lake Grouper. Things like that. So you see some crazy names, but like I said, it is a good, high quality fish to eat, good for consumption.
I like that Kentucky Lake.
Well, it's a clean fish too, right? I mean, it's
it eats plankton. It doesn't eat anything dead on the bottom. It's not like the European carp, the golden carp that we see in the lakes now, which is an invasive species as well. But it eats plankton, so it is not eating anything that's negative. But what it's doing is it's attacking the food pyramid in the ecosystem for all the other small invertebrates and small fishes and shad population. That's the issue that it is.
Yeah, that's where the shad issue comes from, is because they can eat so much more than a shad can.
They're eating all the shad's food.
Your biggest gizzard shad took a long time to get to the biggest gizzard shad in the lake. It doesn't take very long for a Asian carp to reach that same size.
Exactly. It's amazing how quickly they grow.
So are you seeing a decline in the Asian carp numbers in Kentucky Lake? Do you think that
there's less of them there? I this winter I fished a lot this fall and this winter, and I'd see them, but I didn't see near the numbers that I had seen in the past. You get out there and scan on the ledges, and you will see some fish. You still will see some carp. You'll see some in the shallows. We still have a tremendous amount of them, but there's less of them in the carrying capacity of the reservoir now than what there was. And like I said, at Pickwick, I didn't see as many as what we had seen when we saw the absolute crash, but the same stresses that our Kentucky Lake largemouth and smallmouth went through, doggone it, it's happening at Pickwick too. And it's getting ready to happen, and it's just going to continue to move up the Tennessee River lock by lock by lock. And I don't know what the lifetime expectancy is. Is that going to crash in 2 years or 4 years or 5 years at Pickwick? But it's coming. It's coming. And then will Wilson be 4 years, 8 years, or 10 years? And the next one is Wheeler, and the next one is Gunnersville. Gunnersville is the pearl of the Tennessee River. It's the most famous reservoir in the South, with all the Bassmaster history and all the great catches and how good it is and how beautiful it is. The tourism dollar there is number one. So I don't know how many years it's going to take, but it's going to happen there in all of these if we don't stop it here on Kentucky and at Pickwick.
It happens fast too. It happens like within a couple of years. I remember, Kentucky Lake in 2015, 2016, 2017 was a little bit tougher maybe in 2017, but still pretty good. And then all of a sudden, like it seemed like 2018 and 19, it got like tough. It got really, really tough.
We didn't have any fish. We didn't have any good spawns back in 14, 15, and 16. We still had we had a tournament on Kentucky Lake in 18, and the winner had about 85 or 90 pounds. And nothing. And then the next week there was another tournament. It was 100 pounds. But those were the last adult fish left in the system. On the Bassmaster deal, I made the top 10, and I caught 16 pounds one day, 22 pounds one day, and 16 the next day. But I caught 6, 7, and 6 in each of those 3 days. Wasn't like I was catching 25 or 30 fish.
Yeah, right.
I wasn't catching any of these. I mean, I was catching mature keeper bass. And
it wasn't the mega schools of 12, 13, 14.
Oh no. And I mean, you go back to the 90s when we lost the milfoil, 94, 95, and 96. Hey, you came to Kentucky Lake. If it was a 5-fish limit, you better have 30. If it's a 6-fish limit, you're gonna have 36. And it was incredible. I can't tell you how many times I had 25 and they showed me the door. I didn't even get a check. I mean, I'm talking. I bet it had 35, 40 times.
We met a guy that fished the BFLs down there. He said he had 2 10s and got beat.
I'm sure, because we had so many 6 to 8 pound fish in the lake. It was ridiculous.
Crazy.
Ridiculous. But we had so many acres of milfoil, and the milfoil grew out to 12 feet of water.
Right.
And the fish could hide from the pressure. Once that milfoil was gone, Kentucky Lake ledge fishermen and the Tennessee River ledge fishermen are the best offshore fishermen in the world. They're the best they are. They can pick those fish off when there's no place for them to hide, because the fish move out to the hard cover or the structure with hard cover, and the guys can catch them. They caught them great before they had forward facing sonar. The best ledge fishermen live on the Tennessee River in the world. No question about it.
Do you think the bass will move back out to the ledges eventually?
They may not. I don't know. There's not a lot of food out there on the main lake right now.
Right.
You know, you've got the armada of gizzard or of Asian carp that are in the upper column of the water because that's where all the plankton is. They live from the surface down to about 15 feet deep. So those fish have got to be either under them or on top of them just to find something to eat. And you get deeper than 25 feet, there's not a lot of food available on Kentucky Lake. So they go shallow. It's pretty
How's
simple.
the threadfin population at Kentucky Lake?
It's good to see. There's a lot of it. You see a lot of minnows flicking. You hear it go gizzard shad, snap, snap, snap on top of the water. It's a little bit like old times. It's good to see those big clouds of bait fish again. We had a good I haven't fished much here this spring, but all my buddies are telling me we have got a good population of fry around every lay down, around every stick up, around every boat dock piling. There's bait fish everywhere right now. So that'll be the best thing that happens to us.
That's so good to hear, man. That is so good to hear. Let's apologize for everybody that's on here that's got questions. We're gonna pull up some of these questions and start working through them a little bit. I just wanted to I wanted to touch on that Asian carp stuff because I think it is so important, and just wanted to have Mark give us an update on exactly what's going on in Kentucky Lake. Sounds like things are getting better, and I've fished it a couple times this year, and I can tell you from firsthand experience that the fishing is a lot better than it was last year, and even better than it was 2 years prior. So a lot of 15-inch fish, a lot of 16-inch fish.
I was going to say, and hey, you and I are guilty of it both, right? Of the decline in the tourism. We're part of that. We fished Kentucky Lake BFLs for years, and then
it got really tough.
But it got to the point where, if you caught fish in 2 or 3 tournaments, you made the regional.
Especially, out of the back of the boat, we're co-anglers, but just catching one fish a lot of times. It kind of turned into Wren Lake, or
I remember
the
those
Ohio
days.
River or something. It turned into those classic Illinois fisheries. Connor says, how do you take care of fish in warmer weather? Any tricks, tips, or tactics?
There is absolutely one trick to it, and it is called a Vt2. The Vt2 Vent allows your live well to breathe. If it induces air when you run, it pushes air into the live well. It pushes the bad air out, the bad gases, all of the uric acid and all of the metabolic things that fish do when they pee in the live well. It gets pushed out. It keeps the water temperature down in my live well. I don't use many additives anymore. I used to keep peroxide in the boat. I used to keep rock salt in the boat. I keep G juice in the boat. I've got all of that. I've used all of that stuff, but the Vt2 Vent allows that live well to breathe. It allows that ammonia to get out of the water, better water conditions, better oxygen, and cooler water. Cooler water will hold more oxygen. Now, what you can do is add a little bit of ice. Don't pour a 7-pound bag of ice in your live well. You'll shock that fish. You don't want to shock that fish. You want to make the water temperature 1 degree to 3 degrees cooler in your live well by opening it up with that vent. Excuse me. This week, I did have some fish that were struggling because they were postponed fish. I would take 2 handfuls of ice and put them in my live well. That vent would let all those gases out, and I would leave the water in there. I wouldn't take the 83 to 84 degree water, lake water, and pump it in unless I had to fill that live well up when I made a big move. So the Vt2 Vent, it's available from TH Marine. I think you can get it at Tackle Warehouse as well. The scariest thing about it is the installation. You have to take a drill and cut through your live well lid. But you want to take those vents and get them as close to the center line of your boat as you can. So when you're moving down the lake, you are pushing air in, it pushes down, blows all of that metabolic waste out, and it actually will give you more dissolved oxygen. It's the coolest tool I've ever used. I've used them for 10 years. The lady that built them is a Murray State University graduate, and she begged me. She said, I'll pay you if you'll use them. I said, no, Judy, let me have a set. Let me use them a year. And then I went to her and I said, hey, this is the deal. when you're in the line with me, guys, at the Bassmaster event, you're going to get wet because my fish are as wild as can be. I have to be really cautious with them because they'll fly out of the live well if you're not careful. My fish are beautiful in color. They don't look stressed. They don't look beat up. They don't look tired. And the other thing that you can do is go to the dollar store and get a pool noodle and cut it in 3 pieces and put it on one on each side of your live well. So in rough water, when those fish are sloshing around in rough water, you've got those pool noodles floating on the top of your live well, and they're bumping into those soft pool noodles and not the lid of your live well or your lock on your live well. Makes a big difference on how your fish don't get beat up.
Yeah, so that buildup is that foam. Is it that foam on the top of the water that you see when you open your live well and you see that nasty kind of foamy stuff?
You see that old foamy looking stuff. Those are gases. There's a lot of ammonia in that water. The absolute water quality is its worst. I mean, hey, I mean, it's just like if we were in a smoky bar right now, we're not going to be able to breathe real well. If we were confined in a room with a lot of cigarette smoke or other kind of smoke, it's the same thing. And by letting those live wells breathe and getting that ammonia out, I don't care if it's smallmouth in warm water or a spotted bass or a largemouth, I don't lose many fish. Now, if you have fishing mortality, you get a fish that's hooked in the tongue or he swallows a hook. Those are some things that we can't help sometimes as fishermen. Right. That's part of fishing. I hate it. I don't like it. I lost a fish this week because of it, and it cost me 2 classic points. Fish bit a worm. I got the hook. He swallowed the hook, and he was dead when I put him in a live well, basically. But for the fish that are very stressed in hot water, the Vt2 Vent is absolutely the best thing I've ever seen.
So the live well is like a smoky bar, and the Vt2 Vent is like opening the windows, and there's a storm coming in, and there's a nice fresh air blowing through the middle of the bar.
There you go.
That's it. That's exactly how it works.
Hey, and let's be honest, that's a cheap,
inexpensive
insurance policy if you got a good bag of fish and you don't want to lose them.
Right.
Because I don't have them in my live well, and I lost 2 fish last fall. No, 1 fish last fall that fortunately didn't cost me the tournament, but I lost the tournament without the dead penalty. I would have lost the tournament by 0.01. Now, if I would have missed winning the tournament, would have
been healthy, they might have retained more weight too.
You're exactly right. I'm not going. I didn't want to go there because you just.
I'm not trying to bring up
old
stuff
wound there, but it could cost you. It could cost you a check. It could cost you a tournament. It could cost you 2 classic points.
Yeah, so a $50-$60 investment could pay for itself at any given time.
It'll pay for itself first time.
Yep.
First time you use it, it'll pay for itself.
And on top of that, the longevity of our fisheries.
Absolutely. Sure. Better health. They get back in the water in better shape. And I'm telling you, it is the magic bullet as far as fish care, as far as I'm concerned.
The worst thing that you can see as a tournament angler or as a person walking down to the ramp after a tournament let out is seeing a cove full of dead fish, because that does not look good on anybody.
No, it doesn't. And there's some organizations do a better job than others. And one of the things that we really need to be cautious with, if you put your fish in a plastic bag for weigh-in bag, there's only a minute to a minute and a half of oxygen in 10 gallons of water that you've got in a live well bag. You don't have 10 gallons of water. You got 4 gallons of water. So you've only got 2 or 3 minutes to get them some more oxygen in there. And most of our fish are really stressed, and the mortality is really high right there at the weigh-in stage. So if you're fishing a team tournament, be patient. They're not going to let you not weigh your fish. If there's a big line of people there and they're panning out plastic bags, just wait till that line gets smaller, then take your fish up there. Leave them in the live well. They'd be a heck of a lot better in a live well than they would be in a line laying on the concrete in 95-degree weather.
And another thing, if you can pump the water out of your live well into your weigh-in bag instead of dipping your bag into the lake, the fish are going to be better. A lot of times that water, you're pulling up shallow. It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. That's, you're dipping water that's 2 feet deep,
right next to a dock that's got a black float. That's
right.
Your
degrees. Live well water's, let's just say it's 80. That water that right there by your boat's going to be 90. You're throwing those fish in shock. You're putting them in 10-degree warmer water. Take after the boat ride, there's just a lot of stress.
Well, even Mark, you made that comment a while ago. You try not to pump lake water back into your live well. a lot of times in the dead heat of summer when we're out there ledge fishing, that water on some of those ledges can be 80, 85, upwards of 90 degrees, at least here in southeast Missouri. And you're pulling that fish out of 15 or 20 feet of water where that water is not 85 or 90 degrees.
Correct.
So now you're going to shock that fish with hot water versus what they were accustomed to. So you're going to cook him. So
Martin says, Mark, can you give up the juice on those larger Strike King 4X square bill crankbaits?
Well, the old 4.0, it's just a big, what I call a wobble plug. It's a square bill bait that dives as deep as about 8 or 9 feet. That big profile and its buoyance allows me to use it as a jerk bait. I can twitch it on the top like a top water bait, and I can actually make the bait hover over a piece of cover with several quick little tips, rod tip movements like that. That bait just has that big profile. It catches bigger fish. And doggone it, I don't lose a lot of fish with it because they absolutely smoke it when they eat it. So the 4.0, any kind of square bill is a 4-wheel drive of a crankbait. You can run it through cover, around cover, hit cover with it. But this one allows me to do several different things with it. If you'll go to Tackle Warehouse and pull up the video vault, you can see a vlog I did on it here the other day. It's probably about 3 weeks old. I've got 4 or 5 up there that I just recently did with them. We had the crew here in April, and we caught the snot out of them. And then the 4.0 vlog was a lot of fun to do because there were some really good ones that ate it. So if you get a chance to look at those vlogs on Tackle Warehouse that we recently put up, I highly recommend. The photography work is unbelievable. I'm the moron in the front of the boat that got to go fishing, but doggone it, I mean, it's really some cool 12 to 13 minute videos that the TW staff put together. I told them today they're all rock stars. They do a great job.
Sometimes it's fun to be that moron in the front of the boat, isn't it?
Yeah, I guarantee it.
You'd rather be the moron in the front than the guy standing behind the camera in the back.
Yeah, exactly.
What Jake wants to know, are the bluegill biting on Kentucky? What's the bluegill population like down there?
We've got a good bluegill population. The shellcracker population is pretty strong still. The bluegill are getting done spawning here. So there's still quite a bit of those fish in the shallows spawning, on the gravel banks, the little gravel points, little secondary points back there, throwing those little bugs. Those little black bugs, you can catch a lot of those big shell crackers, and it's still a lot of fun. So had a good bluegill season from what I understand.
Man, I've been working on those bluegill on my little farm pond out here the last couple of weeks with my fly riders. Yesterday, I got tired of catching them subsurface, and I was throwing that little popper out there, and they just, they smack. You miss you catch 1 out of 10, but they just crush it, and their mouth is so small they can't get that popper in there. And I don't have any. I need to actually get on the internet and actually find some really small poppers, but it is so fun. They just kill that thing, and then they turn sideways. You're trying to pull them in, they just turn sideways. And
if they would grow to 4 or 5 pounds, you never get them in.
Oh gosh, yeah, they'd take over the world. Brad wants to know, and this is an interesting question: do you like Kentucky Lake or Barkley Lake better?
Always been a Kentucky Lake fan, but there's 2 months out of the year that Barkley outshines Kentucky, and that's April and August. You'll find me on Barkley in April and August, and the rest of the time you'll find me on Kentucky Lake.
Gotcha.
Good to know.
River Billy says he's got the boat behind him going through Tulsa, Oklahoma, heading down to the GFs to chase some 10+ pound Arbuckle bass and Texoma. Good luck, man. I hope it pays off. At least you're not working. I'm going to kind of scan through some of these questions and try to get back up, and then we'll touch on a few more things here. Here's a question from River Billy's. Clear Lake smallmouth this time of year, what are you throwing? So smallmouth in a lake that has a lot of water visibility, clarity.
Well, visibility, you've got to have some flash and some speed. I love burning the spinnerbait when I get around smallmouth. They can't stand that thing. It's a high hookup rate. It's a high catch ratio. Secondary to that, I'd probably have a jerkbait on. And then the third thing I would have would be something like a little Ned Ocho. That Ned rig's pretty deadly on clear water smallmouth.
So Fishing Junkie says, why does everyone say that wind is my friend? Any tips, please? I've never had the luck with the wind.
Well, that's pretty serious. That's a pretty serious question. And one of the things the wind does is it creates a little bit of current. And anytime you have a current, whether it's going this way or it's going that way, if it's going this way, that bass is looking against the current. He's got that current in his face. He's waiting for food to be drifted to him in that current. So if you don't have a lot of current in a lake, wind creates some current, and it tells me what direction that fish is facing. It tells me which side of the dock to throw it. It tells me which side of the stump to throw it. It tells me which side of the big rock to throw it. Those fish will always have their nose looking into the wind.
Good stuff. And it also breaks up the sunlight penetration too. So it allows the fish to be a little bit more secure. They're possibly going to be a little bit more aggressive. Maybe a little bit shallower. You can get away with a moving bait more likely in that kind of situation. Now I think too much wind can be a bad thing. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but if it's not really gassing out there, not on a clear water lake,
it breaks that surface down and the light penetration. So, in certain situations, too much wind can blow a bank out, cause it to get muddy, cause a lot of siltation and things like that. But I love the wind. Has always been my friend. I promise you.
Yeah, I agree. Jim says Van Dam said today that something is going on with Watts Bar. Any knowledge of that, Mark?
Well, 2 weeks ago, the NPFL had a tournament there, and it was tough to come by good solid keepers. They were catching a ton of just under the limit size fish of 15 inches. So I think it's just in a flux where they're getting ready to have great fishing in the near future. A lot of recruitment of largemouth, smallmouth, spotted bass getting into that 15-inch size limit. But right now, there just may be limited numbers of those adult fish, but the future is bright there. There's no doubt about it. It's got grass in it. It's got good offshore structure. It's always got good current in it. It's a good lake. It's a really good lake.
I think it's going through a life cycle as well, too, isn't it?
Sure. I mean, our Tennessee River lakes are old, guys. Not a lot of cover left in them, and that reduces the productivity of the reservoir. So, but I think they're looking at some really good fishing here in the future.
Jim, by the way, I did get your package of jigs that you sent me. We were actually looking at them before we went live. Good looking stuff, and I'll be tossing them around here over the next couple of weeks. So I'll give you some feedback on them. Scott says, Kentucky Lake, do you prefer to fish the north or the south? Let's see, north or south of Blood River?
Well, I'm from Paducah. I went to Murray State University, spent a lot of time in Blood River, and Paducah's the north end. It was just the closest place to get to go fishing. South of Blood River, Paris Landing, Big Sandy, New Johnsonville area, great ledges, great bushes down there to flip. It's all good. That first 80, 90 miles of Kentucky Lake can be really, really good. I've spent more time up here north just because of geography other than anything else. Just quicker to get to the water that way. But I have enjoyed my time in down around Birdsong and all that area down there too. So great lake, 80 miles of water there that I fished a lot. Spent a lot of time on.
That's a lot of water.
I was going to say, if you can't find a stretch of bank to fish between the dam and New Johnsonville, then you got a problem.
That's the truth.
There's a lot of water to fish there.
For sure is. Doug from Auto Trieve, he says, hey, Mark, I'm going to Kentucky Lake this weekend and fishing with Terry Elliott. Just wondering if you knew him.
No, I don't know Mr. Elliott. I sure don't. But I wish you guys luck. I'm sure you guys will have a good weekend. Fishing's been pretty good.
Good deal.
He'll be happy to hear that. Thanks for the tip, Doug. He sent me a picture a while ago of a little spinnerbait hack. So I'm going to be trying that out this weekend.
You have to show it to me after the stream.
I will.
Okay. Darius is from Kentucky Lake. Mark, are they going to put a carp barrier on Kentucky locks when they get it done? They have to stop them from coming through the locks to help the whole Tennessee River system.
Well, that's our hopes, Darius. I hope that happens. We've got the one below Barkley Dam right now, and they're studying to see if our native fish are able to go through the barrier right now, and it doesn't stop our native fish. That could become an issue. But I think right now we're seeing some good results on the bioacoustic fish fence, and we're hoping to see that we will get one on Kentucky Lake, and then when the second lock is finished, we'll get a second one there. We're going to be working hard for that. That's for sure.
Josh says, Mark, how do you deal with a grass die-off in the lake when that was the main habitat for the fish in the specific body of water?
Well, you go straight to hard cover. You look for stumps, you look for rocks, you look for anything out off the bank. The fish tend to move out to structure, not necessarily cover. They move to the structure first, and then the structure that has the most hard cover on it will be where you find your bigger number of fish. The other thing you can do is anything on the bank that you find, they really move to the docks well when the grass is, if there's the docks on the lake, those will be primary spots as well.
Jeremiah says he's been working on the Asian carp with his bow.
My man, go ahead, kill every one of them you can. Thank you, Jeremiah.
There's enough rednecks down in the Kentucky Lake area that if they let them shoot them with a shotgun, they would for sure. So,
how do you catch Asian carp other than bow fishing your nets?
I don't know. I've heard of some guys using almost like an oatmeal based dough ball kind of thing, kind of allowing it to float in the water with a no weight and a hook on it. My son and I have caught a bunch of them on the tail end of a KVD splash. Those feathers, they come up there and eat it on the river. Max has caught a ton of them on a topwater. They don't eat lures very often, but they will occasionally. I've seen some 30 and 40 pounders caught on a football jig. But they don't bite a lure very often, but I've heard of some guys using some dough balls and catching some.
Yeah, I've heard. I remember 3 or 4 years ago, I had a guy tell me that he caught a couple on a popar or some, off the top of the water. Mm-hmm. I didn't know if he was telling the truth or not, but he swore by it.
I've caught them on 6XDs. Steve Ballard at the old bait house caught about a 45 pounder on a football jig, and he said that was the best bite he ever had.
I bet so. I bet so.
Wow.
I've caught them on square bills and things like that. So they will take a bait every now and then. You
just got to wonder what you're leaning into when you lean into like a 45 pounder.
That's an upgrade from a 20-pound drum, a 45-pound Asian carp.
Yeah.
Bass Guy 1960 wants to know, not fishing related, but best places to eat in Paducah. Running away for the weekend there next month.
Oh, good. Well, you need to go down to Max's down on 2nd Street. That's one of my favorite places to eat. Max is a big fishing friend of mine. Next door to that is Doe's, a great place to eat. We've got several nice restaurants downtown, but those are mine and my wife's favorites right there.
Yeah, Nick says snagging. Snagging's another way of catching those things. Sweet corn.
Let's turn in from bass fishing to carp fishing.
Yeah, well, we were a little bit behind on the comments, so I was trying to catch up on them.
So I got a question for you, Mark. So we're getting into the summer, and the Thermocline is going to set up. What's some ways that you have to combat Thermocline? What's your thoughts on the Thermocline?
Well, the Thermocline is when oxygen level, all the organisms in the lake utilize most of the oxygen in the bottom part of the lake, and you start getting a temperature inversion that has very little oxygen below it and most of the oxygen above it. So your fish population get above it. You have a lot of fish that suspend that time. That's when I mentioned Barkley Lake in August. The ledges in Barkley Lake are 8 to 10 feet on top. The ledges on Kentucky Lake are 12 to 15 feet on top, most of them. And when you do get that Thermocline set up, most of the time, most of the structure, the top of the structure on Kentucky Lake is below the Thermocline. So those fish really suspend and become hard to catch. The Thermocline will stay below the top of the structure on Barkley Lake, so the fish are still in the places they've always been. That's why I like August on Barkley better. It's really tough. At that time, I tend to go shallow a lot. I look for creeks that have a natural flowing water system that comes in naturally, a big creek in the back of it, a river in the back of it, and that keeps a little more oxygen, a little water movement, and that keeps those fish around hard cover a lot easier. So that's what I tend to do, is go shallow when you get to Thermocline.
Will those fish go below that Thermocline?
There's an area that they can get to, but it'll be super, super deep. It'll be super, super stressful on them. there won't be zero oxygen. Our lakes just aren't deep enough in this area. Now, a table rock, a bull shoals, things like that, you can get fish that'll go 60, 80, 90 feet deep to get to that better oxygen level, where that middle level between 60 and 15 or 20 feet is kind of a null and void. Your highland reservoirs go through that more so than our flatland reservoirs do.
Okay. That's good to know, because basically anything that's under 40 foot, 50 foot max depth in the lake, you're not going to see anything deeper than 15, 20 foot in the dead heat of summer. So,
right.
John Bob Wilson says, question about carp displacing bass and specific to pushing fish out of bays and creeks. Well, do the carp displace, game fish when they move into an area? What's that relationship?
I think they do. They're a very loud fish under the water. They're a big fish. It's just as if I drove my truck through the studio there, you guys would get the heck out of the way. That's what they do. What they're doing on the main lake is they're taking all the best current breaks, the shell beds, the corners of the points, the corners of the structure that our bass have always used. Doggone it, they get to those places because the current brings the food to them, so they don't have to move much. That's why the bass were there in the first place, because the current brought them the shad. So they have kind of moved fish around and displaced some of our normal places that we find bass, and we're having to find them on secondary eddies and secondary places that are not as desirable for those bass to feed on, because the carp have basically taken over. They're the big kid on the block now, and a 2-pound bass is not going to stay there when a 25-pound predator type looking fish swims through there.
Yeah, can't blame them. Just cannot blame them. So John's got another question. He says he wants to know about the Florida strain fingerlings that have been stocked, and will they have an impact north of the 68 bridge?
In my opinion, John, no. Because one of the unique things that happens with the Florida bass, when it is stocked into a body of water, it basically imprints to that bay that it's been placed in. Years ago, when Tennessee did put the Floridas in, they put them in basically 4 creeks. They put them in White Hurricane, they put them in Cane Creek, they put them in Harmon and White Oak Creek. And that's basically where all the big giant Florida fish that got caught after they became adults came from. They imprint to that area, they stay in that area, and they don't migrate that much. Now, if a fish is caught in a tournament down south and is brought up to Ken Lake or brought up to Kentucky Dam, that may be a little bit different story. I don't know if that fish is going to swim 80 miles to go back to his house, but most of the time they do. They imprint on that area and they stay there the rest of their life.
How far will that fish travel back? Will he make that 80-mile journey? There's
been studies with smallmouth that say, doggone it, they go that far. They go a long way to do that. There have been studies that say that they just find a new home.
Right.
So that's kind of a 50-50 question.
Yeah.
That's why a lot of people catch retreads in marinas.
Absolutely.
Yeah. They just imagine they travel far enough to where they have the things that they need to survive, good cover, good groceries, and they just kind of hang out probably.
Right. Sometimes that move is a better home than where they were at before.
Could have been.
Can be. Sometimes.
So the land between the lakes area, it's notorious for having some kind of
abnormal
activity.
Especially back in some of them creeks.
Back in some of those creeks. Yeah, we've had stories on here of people that have, been way off the beaten path and heard noises up in the woods. So have you heard of any kind of Sasquatch sightings or any Sasquatch, that kind of activity going on in the land between the lakes area?
I know that reminds me of a story of 2 brothers that independently went fishing a couple days apart in Smith Bay on Kentucky Lake. And the older brother, I'm not going to name their names, but know them both well. The older brother heard something in the woods coming off one of the bluffside banks. And it was kind of at dusk. It was late in the evening. And it literally raised a hair on the back of his neck. And he got out of there. He went home, put the boat on the trailer and went home. About a week or 2 later, his brother was fishing, and both of them top-notch fishermen. And he's back there kind of toward the back end of the creek, and he hears noises as well. And they never spoke of it to each other till 2 or 3 weeks later. They were having family dinner together, and it came up, and they were both surprised that they had heard something back there in Smith Bay. So was it a Sasquatch? Was it, at night you hear some crazy things. And I've heard some other stories in the LBL area and in Western Kentucky, some of the bottoms in Western Kentucky. So I don't know if the big fella lives or not, but I'm pretty cozy here in my bedroom tonight, so I'm not going to go outside and check.
I have a friend that told me a story. I'll tell you who this was later. But him and his wife were driving the land between the lakes. He used to own a trailer property down there years ago. And they saw this huge dog-looking creature come across the road. He said it was about 4 foot tall at the back, and it was very, very long. He was saying it was probably 6 or 7 feet long, and it just walked across the road probably 30 yards in front of him. And he saw it. His wife saw it. They both talked about it. They both made sure that they saw the same thing, and they had this, they both saw the same thing, and they had the same perspective of it. Neither one of them could say exactly what it was. But so, there's not only possible Sasquatches over there, there's big, strange dog-looking animals running around in land between the lakes. So be careful over there. You're a lot closer to it than I am. I feel pretty safe where I'm at right now.
I got you. Well, there's some unique things in the environment that you see or you don't see. Right now in Marshall County, up by Kentucky Lake, Fish and Wildlife has issued a warning in Mike Miller Park there in Marshall County in Dravenville of an alligator sighting in the little local lake there.
Oh, wow.
So, really?
I don't know if Fish and Wildlife has been able to confirm or deny it yet or capture the alligator, but it's in the park lake there supposedly, and we don't have many alligator sightings. There was an alligator sighting in Ballard County near the Ballard County Wildlife Refuge that was confirmed. This happens from time to time, and they felt like it was an alligator that may have gotten on a barge that traveled from down south on the Mississippi River north and found his way off right there. So you never know. You never know. I've seen some strange things on the water, some things I've scratched my head about a time or two, but I've never seen an alligator in Kentucky yet.
So don't drag a raw chicken around on a rope when you're walking around that pond, because that's like the best way to find out if there's an actual alligator in the pond.
There was I had a customer at my previous job that he worked down close to the river. I think he was on one of the river boats. And they were coming across railroad tracks one evening, and they were walking across, and there was a couple guys that had stopped, and they were looking at something, and it was a 4 or 5 foot long alligator alive, and he was in between the railroad tracks, and it was in Cape Girardeau.
Really?
Yeah.
How long ago was this?
This was 3 or 4 years ago. No, probably 6, 7 years ago. He showed me a picture of it that he had taken, holding the alligator. They had it taped up, and the conservation had came and got a hold of it. So
I'll be dang. You never know.
I would love to know the story on how that. I mean, most likely it was a pet, but that big, you wouldn't think it would be a pet,
right?
I mean, usually a pet's a 1.5 foot or something like that. It's not a 4 foot long alligator.
But I mean, it could possibly survive on its own for a while here.
Sure.
I mean, the winter's going to get a little chilly, but
they can get in sewage system, something that's got a lot warmer air temperatures throughout the winter and survive. Nature can survive. If there's a will, there's a way most of the time.
You must have picked a good one tonight.
Yeah, we still don't have a winning number. Keep trying, guys. So many numbers between 1 and 200.
About 200 of them.
So while we're going through this, a couple other things I want to touch on real quick was the hybrid hunter and the chick magnet crankbait. Specifically, I guess the hybrid hunter, because we have a lot of grass around here.
Right.
And I've heard that that's, you know, it's a really good crankbait to throw in the grass. But just kind of talk a little bit about that bait, how, you know, the situations to use it in, where does it excel, that kind of thing.
You know, it's kind of a combination of about 3 baits. It's kind of a combination of a topwater, a jerkbait, and a crankbait. It's got an L-shaped lip to it. It has a unique wide wobble to it. The first time I got my hands on one, I went to my little pond in my front yard, which my fish are really educated. They see about everything in the world. And I'm throwing this hybrid hunter out there, the big one, like a crankbait. And I'm like, well, I'm not really that impressed with the thing. It's got a loud rattle, good wobble to it, good color to it. So I made a cast across the pond, and of course I made a backlash. I'm sure you guys never do that, but I did that cast. And so it's floating. It's a real high floating crankbait. And so I peeled my backlash out, I reel it down, and I pop it once. And one of them, I've got 2 4-pounders that live in that pond, and one of them smoked it. I'm like, wow, how about that? You can fish it kind of like a topwater as well. So a little bit of grass in the pond. I made another cast, and I got some grass on the bill. So I snatched it real hard. And when I did that, the bait had a real jerkbait-like appearance, but it had a bluegill profile. And here comes the other 4-pounder from the other direction, and it smokes it. So I started playing with it, using it like a jerkbait, using it like a topwater. I had great success with it in Florida. I've had great success with it in Guntersville with you know, the eelgrass there. And that L shape with the roll kind of pushes the grass out of the way, and it doesn't build up on the lip. You can rip that bait, get it up, get the grass off the lip, and do that. It's been a bait that's been kind of a hidden bait down in Texas on Sam Rayburn and in the Toledo Bend area. Ray Hanselman, the Strike King Pro, finished in the top 5 using it exclusively at the Harris chain on in some hydrilla this year. So it's a cool bait. It's something that doesn't limit your imagination to it, which is really cool as far as a fisherman goes. It makes you do things and experiment that we kind of don't do that much anymore. So that's what kind of excited me, was I could do so many different things with it. The Chick Magnet, I mean, it's a flat-sided bait. Based off of a balsa bait. It throws better than a balsa. It has a harder vibration. It's got that bluegill profile to it. Again, I'll ask you guys to go to the video vault at TW and at Tackle Warehouse and look at the vlog I did with the Chick Magnet the other day. It's an amazing bait. Dives to that 5-foot range, but it's got a real hard wobble to it, which most flat sides don't. Real good in cold water. So it'll be good again in the fall, I'm sure.
Yeah, so do you prefer they make 2 sizes?
I like the big one.
You like the big one?
I like the big one on the hybrid hunter. It has more erratic action to it. It's got more buoyancy to it. But there's been times that, you know, on a high bluebird day with not much wind, that smaller bait has come through too. So both of them have their places, but I like the big one just so it gets me that bigger bite.
Yeah,
sure.
My first indication on that hybrid hunter, you talked me into spending a little bit of money on those, and it was the high float was what set it apart for me. So
absolutely it does.
You got a favorite color or two?
I like green gizzard and clear water. I like the black and chartreuse real good. And there's one, I think it's called Smooth. It's kind of a gray back, pink side, pink cheek on it, white belly. That's kind of cool too. So, but those are the 3 I've caught the most on.
Okay, well, I've got 2 of those colors. I don't have the smooth one, but I'll have a look out, or keep a look out for that one. We got a winner, Perry.
How about that?
It's not set up because Perry won last.
Perry went back to back.
How about that?
Back to back. So I knew there was a reason why I didn't send his stuff off yet. So I'm going to save on postage. But I'll give you we'll hook you up, man. We'll give you the double package. So congratulations.
Good deal.
Very good.
Yeah, that's that hasn't happened in a while. I think
Stephanie was probably the last one.
Stephanie went back to back, and that's been probably
almost
9 months ago, a year ago, or something like that. So good deal. How I was going to ask you about the tornado recovery down there in your neck of the woods. That was devastating, obviously. How's things going in as far as that's concerned?
Well, it's moving along. You know, anytime you have a tragedy like that, it takes some time. I fished the day of the tornado. It was a scary, weird day. It was foggy and misty, and the ducks flew, and the guys that were duck hunting had a great day out there on the lake. The bass didn't bite real well till about 1 o'clock, and from 1 to 2, I caught 20 smallmouth. My best 5 would have weighed 17, 18 pounds, and we were actually practicing for a tournament. There was a Murray State Bass Club tournament that was going to be held as a benefit for them the next day, and they canceled it that afternoon while we were fishing. I was fishing with one of the Murray State kids on the bass team, and so we thought we better get on home about 4 o'clock, and everything got really strange. We ran into a little bit of wind and a little bit of rain on the way home, but we both made it home safely. And then here comes this freight train, 250 miles on the ground, and it was just devastating when I went back up there. I was able to take some of my children and some of our friends and go to the back of Barkley Lake and help Judge Wade White in the back of Little River, or back of Eddy Creek in Lyon County. And Judge White is the man that started the war on carp. Great friend, great person to start that. And so I wanted to help him in his county. And we went up there and we removed all kinds of 2x4s and sheet metal and things like that from the stretch between I-24 and the other causeway that you see when you cross I-24 to the east on Eddy Creek. And it's coming along. You're seeing a lot of new construction. You're seeing a lot of new roofs. You're seeing people come back to life and resettle in those areas. It's still tragic to see where the trees have been destroyed and things like that. I drove through that coming home near Benton, where it touched down in Benton, and there were some damages there and some lives lost there. But yesterday coming home from the event at Pickwick, but things are green, the trees are growing again. And, in 5 to 10 years, you won't see that in the trees, but in that exact pathway where it crossed Kentucky and Barkley Lakes, it's pretty barren, and it is a stark reminder how small we actually are.
Yeah, we were talking about that at the ball tournament a couple weeks ago. A friend of mine was down at Kentucky Lake over the holiday weekend, and he had taken a couple videos of some of the areas where he had went across the lake at, and it was devastating. Really, like you said, it puts it into perspective, right?
Yes.
How small fish we are, no pun intended here, in this big pond that we live in.
Yeah, I drove to Moore's, one of the BFLs, and on the way back, I went down in the morning. It was dark, so I couldn't see. But then on the way back, I got to see some of the. It'd be normal for a little bit, and then all of a sudden, you could just see the chaos, and then it'd go back to just normal, and you could see. I mean, you couldn't tell on the ground in the path, but I'm sure from up above, it was pretty obvious exactly the line of the tornado.
My mother and father-in-law have a house that's less than a mile as the crow flies from the damage. They didn't have any damage whatsoever on their house. Their house is on the south bank of Little Bear, and you get on the other, the next bay south is Cambridge, and then what we call Little Cambridge, and that whole point between those, it's utter devastation. I mean, it's just like it got evaporated. So it's just crazy how arbitrary things can be. And in Mayfield's another one of those towns in which it just obliterated. I have not driven through downtown Mayfield yet. I've driven around it. And it breaks my heart to even think about going down there for the loss of life there.
Yeah, it's
thoughts and prayers for the families, and obviously we know they're still recovering.
It's going to take some time.
It's not going to. We were talking about the same one. There was a tornado that went through Fredericktown, a little town, I guess, northwest of here, and you talk about the way the crow flies and where a tornado hits. There's an old barn, probably 150-year-old barn that has zero damage on it, and the house that's less than 100 yards away was leveled. Sure. So that just shows you the power.
Yeah, they're strange. We had a tornado came through Jackson, our hometown, probably it was probably 12, 14 years ago, and it took my mom's shed, sucked it off the foundation, and threw it in the city pond behind the house there. Didn't do anything to her house. It sucked this is crazy. So we were, after the tornado, we were looking around at all the damage. There's 2x4s stuck in the ground, and you walk up to them and you think you're just going to grab them and pull them out of the ground. No, they're in the ground. There's trees bent over, just treetops blown down. It looks crazy. And so we're back in the woods, probably we're 1,000 yards from my mom's house. And I see this turkey leg in the woods. It's a turkey leg cut off about right here. And it's got a tag on it. And I'm like, what is that? And I go down there and I grab it and I pull it up. And I look at it and it says Steve Bullinger. That was my mom's neighbor. So I grabbed it, gave it to her. She, approached him the next day or something with it. That tornado had sucked that turkey leg out of his garage, lifted it all the way across the pond and deposited it in the woods, 1,000 yards away. Yeah. But didn't hurt her house, didn't hurt their house really. Maybe just a little bit of gutter damage, but somehow it had sucked that, that object out. It's just crazy. Tornadoes are just nuts. The stuff that they do, it's unbelievable. But I'll never forget that. It's just a random object that got sucked up into the clouds and deposited, 1,000 yards away.
Paducah, Cape Girardeau, we live right in the middle of it all, right?
Yeah,
we do. We do.
It's the price we pay to live in the Midwest.
It beats California
every day of the week.
Yeah. All right. Well, any last minute questions before they shut this down? We've been on here for almost 2 hours. It's been awesome. It always amazes me how fast time goes by when you're talking fishing. I really appreciate you jumping on here and spending some time with us. One more question. There's a BFL this Saturday. What kind of weights are going to take?
Ooh, I'm going to say it'll take 1910.
19. I'm writing it down. I'm writing it down. 1910.
1910.
Okay. So
offshore?
I'm not going to say.
Okay.
I'm going to say 1910.
Are you fishing it?
Somebody must be fishing this tournament.
1910. Okay, write down. Hopefully that's out of the back of the boat, and hopefully it's me because that's where I'll be fishing at. Barry, how has high gas prices limited professional fishing?
Well, I had $1,000 gas bill this week down at Pickwick.
Holy cow!
I was running 110 miles a day round trip, and it was what I had to do. I mean, I didn't like it. I had to suck it up, but those were the fish that were going to get me to where I needed to be to the Bassmasters Classic. It's put about 30% more cost in fishing for me right now. It's going to be tough on some guys that may not be as economically stable as they need to be. So there'll be some guys that won't be making those longer runs, and I may start making some of those longer runs just to get to areas where I don't have to deal with more fishing pressure. So I probably didn't see 7 or 8 tournament boats down there where I was at. I like to fish alone like that.
Well, you answered my question. Is it affecting other folks and limiting those long runs like that? It sounds like it is.
Well, it could, but as you know, like I said, with the Alabama Armada, the Mississippi Navy, and the Volunteer Navy auxiliary, they're spending gasoline money like crazy because there were boats everywhere on the lake. And it will get to a point that it slows us down some. You have to think about it a little bit. Filled up my truck today. It was $125. It hurts. I don't like spending that kind of money on transportation, but in the interim time, looks like that's what we're going to have to deal with, and it will turn, it will change, but it's just going to be tough for a lot of folks right now, and I just hope we can all get through it.
Andy, keep those Cumberland Pro Bama jigs at your house. Do not give those to Phil, because I know Phil's going to be fishing out the back of the boat in the BFL as well. He does not need to see those. Don't give those to him. Jim, yeah, Steve Floyd, I think, won the last BFL down there.
Stevie, I hadn't seen Stevie in a long time, and I know he didn't catch them deep. I mean, he's always been a shallow water guy, so his son knows how to fish deep, but maybe Stevie's learned a few things since I've talked to him last.
I think there's just enough bushes in the water that he can go down there. He can run far enough south to get it done. And he had 22 pounds, I think. He brought in a big sack.
He's a heck of a good shallow water man. Always has been.
Hammy, good to see you on here. So Mark, any last closing statements or anything you want to touch on before we shut this sucker down?
Again, I urge everybody to touch base with it doesn't take but just a 2-sentence email. Please, Senator such and such, please keep your eye on the Asian carp problem. It's affecting our economy. Dear, thank you very much, Mark Menendez. That's all it takes. Just write that little email to your elected official. Please do that and take more kids fishing. Spend more time with your family out in the outdoors, and I think we'll all be living in a better place.
Can't agree anymore.
Excellent. So good luck in your next the rest of the Elite Series. You got a little break, don't you? have like 5 weeks off or something?
About 5 weeks off, and then I head to the great state of New York, where gasoline about to be $25 a gallon, and then off to South Dakota of all places, and then over to La Crosse to finish it up. Going to get lucky. My wife's going to come with me to the last one, so get to spend some good time with her. And then we got ICAST in there too, and we're going to sneak down to Florida together as well. So lot going on, ready to get through this season. Really got the crosshairs on the Bassmasters Classic again. I'd like to have one more ride around the arena before I get too old to be able to do it. So
hey, we're pulling for you here in Southeast Missouri.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you guys having me, and love to talk to you again in the future. So we'll do it again sometime in the future.
All right. We'll sign out on that. Thanks for everybody for hanging out with us this evening. And like I said, Mark, good luck down the road.
Thank you so much, guys. Good night.